Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to our Shirin Svasemis Parshas Korach Tavshin Pei Hey. When Korach Va'adaseh come to complain and fight Moshe Rabbeinu, Korach says, I would like to be the Kohen Gadol. I don't want Aaron Kohen to be the Kohen Gadol. I'm not satisfied with being a Levi. Rather, I want to be the Kohen Gadol. Moshe Rabbeinu answers him back, Atmikem. Is it small and insignificant? The fact that the Rebbeinu was mavdal you from amongst Klal Yisrael to choose you to be a Levi to serve in the Mishkan? Is that not enough? Is that insignificant in your eyes, the fact that you're a Levi? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, you should be happy and satisfied with being a Levi. You were separated from amongst everybody else in Klal Yisrael. That alone should go ahead and give you simcha. Fraktis Vasemis in the year Tafresh Lamed Vav. I don't understand. Korach Va'adaseh clearly knew what it meant to be a Levi. Korach understood the greatness of being a Levi, and he knew what it meant to get separated and different and to be different than the rest of Klal Yisrael and to be a Levi. Yet nevertheless, Korach Va'adaseh was not satisfied. Korach said, I don't want to be a Levi, I want to be a Kohen. What was Moshe Rabbeinu answering them back? Hama'at mikem, are you not satisfied? Is it small in your eyes? The fact that you're a Levi? What exactly was Moshe Rabbeinu telling Korach? Says the Heligas Vasemis in the year Tafresh Lamed Vav, in a small piece, an unbelievable Yisai. Yesh lumad derech ish hayasher ba'avodas habayri. A person who wants to serve the Rabbanan Shalom properly can learn from this dialogue and exchange between Moshe and Korach the proper way to serve Hashem. Kol sha'olam adrega yoser. Often a person thinks that as I grow and as I get to higher madregas, the things that are small and insignificant just become smaller and just become less important in my life. And the only thing that I'm going to care about as I grow and as I become big, I'm only going to care about those things that are large and impressive, those things that are big ticket items, those things that are really large things. Those are the only things that I'm going to care about. But those things that are small, those things that are little actions, a person can say to himself, because I've grown, because I've come so big, I don't really care about those things. Says this Vasam is exactly the opposite. Kol sha'olam adrega yoshet, higher and greater a person becomes, Yodea chashivas kol davar katan. He now is able to look at those things that are seemingly, quote unquote, small, and he says those are not small. On the contrary, the greater I become, the more I'm able to recognize the importance and the significance of those small and seemingly unimportant things. Like Rashi tells us on Vahaya Ekev Tishmon, that those mitzvahs that a person tramples on with their heel, those mitzvahs that a person looks at as a mitzvah kala, something small and insignificant, on the contrary, those are the ones that a person needs to be careful about. And says this Vasem, the greater a person becomes, the greater a tzaddik is, the more he recognizes that every little action that he does, the Baruch is medaktik with him, gachut asayra, everything is important, everything is big, every small thing that he does has a tremendous impact on Shemayim. And as opposed to Chalila, a person getting an ego and becoming a Gaiva and saying, now I only care about big things and those small things, I can let them slide. A person says, Fakar, the greater he becomes, Yedeh Chashivos, Kol Davar Katan, he gets to recognize and to value those things that are seemingly small. In Parsha Kiseitze and Tafresh Lamed Daled, the Sasem says a similar thing in the pasuk of Toiv Ma'at L'Tzadik. The pasuk in Tehillim says, Toiv Ma'at L'Tzadik, Mehamoin and the simple translation is the Rebbeinu would like a little bit that the tzaddik does rather than the tremendous amount that the Rasha does. The Rebbeinu is not interested, so to speak, in the avoid of the Rasha. Rather, he'd prefer the toiv ma'at of the tzaddik. But says this Vasamis is another way to understand what the pasuk means. What does the Yetzer Hara do? Al yedei haribui shemoisiv dvarim shadash shemoisiv chatam kalam kamoishe dvarim shadash beikavav. What does the Rasha? What does the Yetzer Hara do to the Rasha? The Yetzer Hara goes ahead and says, that's not significant. That's not significant. That mitzvah that you did doesn't mean a lot. It doesn't matter if you skip it. That avera that you did is not so bad. It doesn't matter if you do it. He goes ahead and he makes it. The person has an ego. The person grows, and because of the growth that they have, they start to go ahead and let the small things slide. And slowly the riboy ends up coming, that all of those small things end up piling up and making a tremendous impact on a person's avodas Hashem. What's the opposite? The opposite end of the spectrum. The tikkun at tzaddik is bechinas amat. The tikkun of a tzaddik is toiv ma'at letzaddik. Sheyachashev etzlem asher zeichel akayim mitzvahs boirei. The tzaddik looks at every little thing that he does and says, this is a tremendous chus. The greater I become, the greater I'm able to recognize that tzaddik says that everything I do is important. Everything I do is significant. Every small avera that Chalila I have a chance to do and I go ahead and stop myself from doing is precious by Hashem. Every mitzvah that I do means the world to the Rabbanan Shalom. A person's able to go ahead and be machshev af shehu ma'at, even a little bit that he does. And based on the fact that he's able to go ahead and recognize the greatness of that ma'at, that little bit, then that little bit is able to sprout into being something so much bigger than that. Toiv ma'at l'tzadik, the little bit that the tzaddik has, and the little bit that the tzaddik is able to recognize that it's not so small and it's not so insignificant, but every action that I do is meaningful, and every action that I go ahead and do, it means tremendous amount, that brings a tremendous nachas ruach to the Rabbanan Shalom. Toiv ma'at l'tzadik, that's how a person eventually turns into a tzaddik. As opposed to the Rasha looks at things and says, It's not so important. It's not so significant. Does it matter? Does it not matter? Doesn't really matter. It's something small. Only the big things, only the impressive things, only the large mitzvahs and averos. Those are the only things that the Rasha cares about, and all of that is Atzas Yetzirah to knock a person down. Says this Vasam is back to the conversation and the dialogue between Moshe Rabbeinu and Korach. This was the conversation. They said, Moshe Rabbeinu showed them, do you think that because I became so big, I started to look at things as becoming insignificant? On the contrary. Even though I got to the greatest madrega, the madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu, the madrega that no Navi was ever able to get to and will never be able to get to. Nevertheless, chavev kol davar katan v'gadol b'avodas habari. Everything was still significant by Moshe Rabbeinu. U'lachein zachal kol zeh, and because of that, he was then capable of remaining and becoming a Moshe Rabbeinu and becoming the person that's continuously able to grow in his lifetime, as opposed to going ahead and starting to slip because of this nasu, because of the fact that he grew. La'afuke heim, says Moshe Rabbeinu, but you, look at you. As soon as you get something, instead of allowing that to give you the recognition of how every action is important, you go out and do the opposite. You look at things and say, that's not important anymore. It's not significant. I want something bigger. I want something more impressive. I want something that makes more of a rush, more of a call, something that the people will hear about more, something that will be more impressive, and you're not satisfied with the small things. Says this Vasam, this is a difference between a tzaddik and a rasha, between Moshe Rabbeinu and Korach. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greater he grows, the more he's able to look at everything and recognize its significance. Korach, the greater he grows, the more he looks at things and says these things are unimportant, these things are insignificant. Obviously, like the Vasam says, he is lilmud derech ish. We have to learn from this dialogue, this conversation between Moshe Rabbeinu and Korach, the way that we're supposed to look at life, to be able to value every little thing that we do, every nisayon that we're able to overcome, every mitzvah that we're able to do. And the greater we become, the more we're able to value those things, the more we're able to value the things that we do, the more we're able to value things that other people do, the more we're able to look at those things that the world may look at as small. Well, we say they're not small, they're significant, because the greater a person grows, the more he's able to know Yedei Chashivas called over Katan. Hashem should help us that as we grow, we should be able to recognize not to allow the small things to slide, not to allow ourselves to only be satisfied with something big and impressive, but on the contrary, the more we grow, the more we're able to go ahead and to give credit and to put value on those things that the world may look at as small and insignificant. We're able to look at those things as significant, and by doing that, to go ahead and emulate Moshe Rabbeinu and not Korach. Have a great Shabbos.